Marcus sat at the kitchen table, watching his wife Shayla pour water over the fried chicken he'd bought for their daughter's birthday. 3 years of marriage. Every paycheck handed over without question. Every late shift covered without complaint. He'd trusted her with everything. She'd been planning something else entirely. Marcus Williams woke up the same way every morning. 5 a.m. The alarm barely made a sound before he silenced it. 27 years old, and his body already knew the routine better than his mind did. He'd slip out of bed quietly, careful not to wake Shayla or their daughter Amara in the next room. The warehouse shift started at 6, and the 45-minute drive meant leaving the house by 5:15 at the latest. No coffee, no breakfast, just a quick wash, work clothes, and out the door while the neighborhood still slept. He'd been doing this for 3 years, ever since he and Shayla got married. She stayed home with Amara and Marcus worked. That was the arrangement. That was what felt right to him. His grandmother had raised him to believe a man provided. A man handled his responsibilities without complaint. A man made sure his family never wanted for anything. So that's what Marcus did. Every 2 weeks, when that paycheck hit his account, Marcus would come home and hand it directly to Shayla. All of it. $2,400 before taxes, $1,900 and change after. She managed everything. The mortgage on his grandmother's old house that had been paid off years ago, the utilities, the groceries, the savings, Amara's needs, everything. Marcus never questioned it, never asked to see the accounts, never checked the balances. He trusted his wife completely. When he needed something, he'd ask. $20 here for gas, $40 there for work lunches. She'd usually sigh first, like he was asking for too much, then give him half of what he requested. He'd make it work. He always made it work. That's what men in his family did. Shayla would tell him they were saving, building Amara's college fund, planning for their future, creating something stable. Marcus believed her. Why wouldn't he? She was his wife, the mother of his child, the woman he'd promised his life to in front of God and their families. Trust wasn't something you questioned in a marriage. At least that's what he thought. The warehouse job wasn't glamorous, but it was honest. Marcus supervised a team of 8 guys loading and unloading freight trucks. He worked the overnight shifts most weeks because they paid an extra $2 an hour. That was an extra $80 a week, an extra $320 a month. Money that could go toward Amara's future, money that could give them breathing room. So he took the nights. He took the double shifts. He took whatever extra hours they offered, and he never complained about being tired. His grandmother had raised him that way. After his parents died in a car accident when he was 9 years old, she'd taken him in without hesitation, a woman in her 60s raising a grieving child alone. She worked as a home health aide during the day and cleaned offices at night. She never made much, but they never went without. She taught him the value of hard work, the dignity of sacrifice, the importance of doing what needed to be done without expecting praise or recognition. She'd passed away 18 months ago, diabetes complications that came on fast. Marcus had held her hand in the hospital those last 3 days. She told him she was proud of the man he'd become, proud of the husband and father he was, proud that he understood what really mattered in life. She'd squeezed his hand and told him to keep being exactly who he was. Those were her last words to him. Keep being exactly who you are. Marcus thought about her every morning when he walked out of that house at 5:15. Thought about her when he clocked in at the warehouse. Thought about her when his back ached and his feet hurt and his eyes burned from lack of sleep. She'd done twice as much with half as much. He could handle this. Amara's 2nd birthday was coming up. Shayla had been planning for weeks. She wanted it to be special. Bounce house in the backyard, catered food, professional photographer, the whole thing. Marcus worked extra doubles to make sure they could afford it. When Shayla showed him the estimates, he just nodded and said, "Handle it." Whatever their daughter needed, whatever made this day memorable, he'd make it work. He asked if he could invite his cousin Tasha. She was the only family he had left on his side. She'd been at their wedding. She'd been at the hospital when Amara was born. She was good people. But Shayla's face tightened when he mentioned it. She said it was fine, but her tone said otherwise. This was supposed to be immediate family only. Shayla's mother, her sister, her aunts. That kind of family, not cousins from Marcus's side who barely knew them. But she agreed. Reluctantly. The morning of the party, Marcus worked a half shift, then stopped by Amara's favorite chicken spot on the way home. It wasn't part of the catered food Shayla had ordered, but it was something he could contribute, something he could bring to his daughter's celebration that came from him. He bought a family meal. Fried chicken, biscuits, coleslaw, $28 that he'd saved from his lunch money over the past 2 weeks. He walked into the house around 3 in the afternoon. Guests were already starting to arrive. Shayla's mother was setting up decorations. Her sister was arranging the gift table. The bounce house was inflated in the backyard. Everything looked perfect. Marcus carried the chicken into the kitchen, proud of his small contribution. Shayla looked at the bags in his hands. Her eyes moved from the chicken spot logo to Marcus's face. There was something in her expression he couldn't quite name. Not anger exactly. Something colder than that. Disgust, maybe. Or contempt. She walked over slowly, took the bags from his hands, and opened them. The smell of fried chicken filled the kitchen, warm and familiar. Then she went to the sink, filled a glass with water, and poured it slowly over the entire tray of chicken. The water soaked through the breading, turning everything into a soggy mess. Grease and water pooling at the bottom of the aluminum tray. She looked at Marcus while she did it, made sure he was watching. "That's all you deserve, Marcus. Cheap chicken for a cheap man." She said it loud enough for the guests in the next room to hear, loud enough for her mother and sister to look over, loud enough for Tasha, who'd just walked in, to stop in the doorway. The kitchen went quiet. Everyone waited to see what Marcus would do, how he'd respond, if he'd raise his voice or defend himself or make a scene at his daughter's birthday party. Marcus didn't do any of that. He just looked at the ruined chicken, looked at his wife's face, and walked out the back door. Didn't slam it, didn't say a word. Just walked out into the backyard and stood by the fence while the party continued inside. Tasha found him 20 minutes later. She didn't ask if he was okay because she could see he wasn't. She just stood next to him. Finally, she said, "You don't deserve that." Marcus shook his head, said it was nothing, said Shayla was just stressed about the party, said it wasn't a big deal. But they both knew he was lying. Tasha knew. Marcus knew. Something had shifted in that moment, something that couldn't be unshifted. He stayed outside for most of the party, came in when they sang Happy Birthday, watched Amara blow out her candles, smiled when she opened her presents, then went back outside. When the last guests finally left and the house was quiet, Shayla didn't apologize, didn't mention it at all, just asked him to help break down the bounce house, like nothing had happened, like she hadn't humiliated him in his own kitchen in front of her entire family. Marcus helped break down the bounce house, put the tables away, took out the trash, then went to bed. Shayla stayed up watching TV. He could hear it through the walls. Some reality show where people screamed at each other. He lay there in the dark trying to understand when things had changed between them, when he'd stopped being her husband and started being someone she looked at with contempt. He couldn't pinpoint the moment, but he knew it had happened. 2 days later, a certified letter arrived. Marcus was at work, so Shayla signed for it. When he got home that evening, she was waiting for him at the kitchen table. The envelope was sitting in front of her, unopened. Her arms were crossed. "What's this about?" Marcus looked at the return address. Thompson and Associates, estate attorneys, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, addressed to Marcus Anthony Williams, sole beneficiary. He had no idea what it was. Told Shayla that. She didn't believe him. It's from an estate attorney, Marcus. Who died? I don't know. My grandmother passed 1.5 years ago. Maybe it's something about her affairs. Shayla picked up the envelope, turned it over in her hands. They want you to come to Philadelphia for a meeting. Says here it's about substantial assets requiring immediate attention. What substantial assets did your grandmother have? Marcus sat down. He was tired from the shift. His head hurt. He didn't want to deal with this right now. She didn't have anything, just the house. Maybe she had a life insurance policy or something. Life insurance policies don't require trips to Philadelphia, Shayla said. This is something else. She opened the envelope, read the letter out loud. The law firm requested Marcus's presence at their office next Tuesday at 2 p.m. for the reading of estate documents. They regretted the delay in contacting him, but certain legal requirements had to be met before distribution could begin. A Mr. Gerald Thompson would be handling the matter personally. The letter was formal, professional, and gave no details about what kind of assets they were talking about. Shayla's whole demeanor changed after reading that letter. The coldness from the birthday party disappeared. She became sweet, attentive, asked Marcus about his day at work, cooked his favorite meal that night, smothered pork chops with rice and gravy, sat next to him on the couch while they watched TV, rubbed his shoulders, told him she was sorry about the chicken incident, said she'd been stressed and took it out on him, said she loved him. Marcus accepted the apology, accepted the attention, but something felt off about it, the timing. He didn't say anything, though, just let her be sweet, let her cook and care and apologize. Maybe this was her way of making amends. Maybe she'd realized she'd gone too far. Over the next few days, Shayla brought up the Philadelphia meeting constantly, asked about Marcus's grandmother's family, where they were from, what they did for work, if anyone had money, if anyone owned property. Marcus didn't have answers to most of her questions. His grandmother had raised him alone. He knew she had siblings, but they died before he was born. He didn't know much about the generations before that. His grandmother never talked about it. Shayla seemed frustrated by his lack of information, kept pressing, kept asking. Marcus finally told Tasha about it over the phone. Just mentioned it casually. Said he had to go to Philadelphia next week for some estate thing, probably nothing major. Tasha went quiet for a second. Why would a Philadelphia firm handle a small estate from Baltimore? Marcus hadn't thought about that. Said he didn't know. Big firms don't chase pennies, Marcus. Something's not small here. That thought stuck with him. He tried not to think about it too much, but it was there in the back of his mind. When Tuesday came, Shayla was ready to go 2 hours early. She'd picked out a nice dress, done her hair, put on makeup, like they were going somewhere important. Marcus wore the same slacks and button-down shirt he wore to his grandmother's funeral. They were the only dress clothes he owned. The drive to Philadelphia took 90 minutes. Shayla talked the entire time, speculated about what the meeting could be about, wondered if his grandmother had secretly owned something valuable. Maybe a piece of land somewhere. Maybe some stocks or bonds. Maybe she'd been saving money for years and nobody knew. Marcus let her talk. He was nervous for reasons he couldn't explain. Something about this felt bigger than a small life insurance policy. They arrived at the address downtown. It wasn't what Marcus expected. The building was all glass and steel, modern, expensive looking. The lobby had marble floors and a security desk, and elevators with digital screens showing the floors. They rode up to the 22nd floor. Shayla kept looking around. Her eyes were wide. She was taking in every detail. The expensive furniture in the waiting room, the original artwork on the walls, the receptionist behind the glass desk who greeted them by name. Mr. Williams, Mr. Thompson is ready for you." They started to walk back together, but a tall black man in an immaculate suit met them in the hallway. He was older, maybe late 60s, with gray hair and kind eyes behind wire-framed glasses. He extended his hand to Marcus. "Mr. Williams, I'm Gerald Thompson. Thank you for making the drive up." Marcus shook his hand. Thompson's grip was firm but not aggressive. Professional. He turned to Shayla. "And you are?" "I'm his wife, Shayla Williams." Thompson nodded politely. "I understand. However, for the initial consultation, I'll need to speak with Mr. Williams privately. Estate protocol. I hope you understand." Shayla's smile faltered. She looked at Marcus like he should say something. He didn't know what to say. Thompson was already gesturing toward his office. "Mrs. Williams, there's a comfortable waiting area just down the hall. This shouldn't take more than an hour." Before Shayla could protest further, Thompson was leading Marcus into a corner office with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. The door closed. Marcus heard it lock. Thompson gestured to a chair across from his desk. "Please, sit." Marcus sat. Thompson walked around to his side of the desk. There was a file there, a thick file, several inches of documents. Thompson rested his hand on top of it for a moment before looking at Marcus. "Mr. Williams, I've been the trustee of your family trust for 34 years. Marcus blinked. "Family trust? My grandmother?" "Your great-grandfather, actually. Booker Williams." The name meant nothing to Marcus. He'd never heard it before. Thompson opened the file and pulled out an old black-and-white photograph. A man in his 40s standing in front of a brick building. Strong features, proud posture, dressed in a suit that looked expensive even in the faded photograph. "Your great-grandfather bought his first commercial property in Philadelphia in 1962. He was a Pullman porter who'd saved every penny he made for 20 years. When the riots happened and white flight started, properties in the garment district were going for nothing. Booker bought 3 buildings that first year. Paid cash." Thompson pulled out more documents, property deeds, old records, maps of Philadelphia with certain blocks highlighted. He kept buying through the 70s. Every time the neighborhood declined, he bought more. Warehouses, corner lots, apartment buildings, things that everyone else was running away from. He held on to every single property, never sold, just held. Marcus was trying to follow, trying to understand what this had to do with him. Thompson continued, "Your great-grandfather died in 1981, left everything to his daughter, your grandmother. She continued the strategy, held the properties, collected rent, reinvested. The city started coming back in the 90s. Gentrification hit the garment district hard in the 2000s. Those buildings everyone abandoned. They're now prime center city real estate." Thompson slid a document across the desk. Marcus looked at it. It was an appraisal report. Recent. The number at the bottom made his vision blur. He had to read it twice to make sure he was seeing it. Right. $525 million. That's the current appraised value of the 47 commercial properties held in the Williams Family Trust. Annual rental income ranges between 18 and 22 million depending on the year. All managed by a professional property management firm. All maintained. All profitable. Marcus couldn't speak, couldn't process what he was hearing. Thompson pulled out more documents. Tax records, financial statements, bank account summaries. "Your grandmother passed 18 months ago. The trust terms stipulated that you would be contacted once her affairs were fully settled and a waiting period had passed. That period is now over. You are the sole living beneficiary, Mr. Williams. You have full control of these assets." The room felt like it was tilting. Marcus gripped the arms of the chair. His throat was dry. "I work at a warehouse." Thompson's expression didn't change. Your grandmother wanted you to live a normal life until you were ready. She was very specific in her instructions to me. She said you needed to understand the value of hard work before you understood the value of wealth. She wanted you to build your character before you built your empire. Marcus looked down at the documents. The numbers didn't feel real. The properties didn't feel real. None of this felt real. Why didn't she tell me? I asked her that same question many times over the years. She always gave me the same answer. She said money changes people. She said she needed you to know who you were before you knew what you had. She said she needed you to choose your path in life based on who you wanted to be, not based on what you could buy. Thompson pulled out another document. The trust currently holds liquid reserves of $8.7 million. That's separate from the properties. That's operating capital. You can access monthly distributions immediately if you choose. Or you can leave everything as is and let it continue to grow. The choice is entirely yours. Marcus sat there for what felt like hours but was probably only minutes. Finally, he looked up at Thompson. What if I'm not ready? Thompson smiled for the first time. Your grandmother said you'd say that. She said to tell you that ready isn't a feeling, ready is a choice. And when you're ready to choose, I'll be here to help. The meeting lasted another 45 minutes. Thompson walked Marcus through every detail, every property, every account, every option. He explained that nothing had to be decided today, that Marcus could take all the time he needed, that the trust had been managed successfully for decades and would continue to be managed successfully until Marcus decided what he wanted to do. When Marcus finally walked out of that office, his mind was somewhere else entirely. Shayla was pacing in the waiting area. She jumped up when she saw him. What took so long? What did he say? Marcus walked past her toward the elevators. She followed, asking questions he couldn't answer yet. When they got to the car, Marcus just sat in the driver's seat, staring at the steering wheel. Shayla kept pressing. Marcus, talk to me. What's going on? How much did she leave you? He started the engine. It's complicated. There's paperwork. I have to figure things out. What kind of paperwork? What do you have to figure out? I can't talk about it right now. The drive home was tense. Shayla oscillated between concern and frustration. She wanted to know. She deserved to know. They were married. Whatever this was, it affected both of them. Marcus just drove. When they got home, he went straight to their bedroom, told Shayla he needed to sleep. He had the overnight shift. She didn't push. Not yet. Marcus didn't sleep. He lay there looking at the ceiling. $525 million, 18 to 22 million a year in rent. His grandmother had lived in a 2-bedroom house and clipped coupons and worked 2 jobs until she couldn't anymore. She'd had all of that and never spent it, never told him, never even hinted at it. She'd let him struggle, let him work doubles, let him hand his paychecks over to Shayla every 2 weeks, let him ask for lunch money like a child. She'd watched all of that and said nothing. At first, Marcus felt angry about it, but the anger didn't last, because he understood. She'd wanted him to know what it meant to provide without wealth, what it meant to sacrifice without abundance, what it meant to be a man without money making it easier. She'd wanted him to build something real inside himself first, and she'd been right to do it. Over the next 3 days, Shayla became relentless. She asked about the meeting constantly, demanded to know what the attorney had said, what his grandmother had left, what was in those documents. Marcus kept telling her he was still processing it, still figuring it out. She didn't accept that answer. On the 4th night, Marcus couldn't sleep again. He got up around 2 a.m. and went to the kitchen. His laptop was on the counter. He'd never checked their bank account before, never had a reason to. Shayla handled everything, but something Thompson had said was bothering him. She said money changes people. She said she needed you to know who you were before you knew what you had. Marcus opened the laptop and logged into their joint account. Shayla had given him the login information years ago. He'd never used it. The page loaded. Checking account balance, $847. He scrolled down, saw his paycheck deposits every 2 weeks, $1,900 and change. Then he saw transfers out, small amounts to utilities, groceries, payments that made sense. But there were other transfers too, large amounts, going to an account labeled Williams Personal Holdings. Marcus clicked on the transaction history, 3 years of transfers. Most of his paycheck, every single pay period, moving to that other account. Thousands of dollars, tens of thousands. He did the math in his head. Over 3 years, he'd made about $140,000. Looking at the bills that had been paid, the groceries, the necessities, maybe $40,000 had gone to actual household expenses. Where was the rest? He clicked through more screens, found the savings account Shayla had told him about, the one they were building for Amara's college fund. Balance, $127,612. Marcus felt his chest tighten. That money hadn't been saved. It had been taken, redirected, hidden. He scrolled through the transactions on that account too, saw withdrawals, large ones, charges to stores he'd never heard of, luxury retailers, high-end boutiques, and then there were payments, monthly payments of $3,500 to something called KL Services, 8 months of those payments, $28,000 to something he'd never heard of and definitely never approved. Marcus grabbed his phone, did a search for KL Services with the address listed on the bank statement. It came up immediately. It wasn't a service, it was a luxury apartment complex downtown, high-rise building, granite countertops, rooftop pool, starting rent around $3,000 a month. The website showed photos of the lobby, floor-to-ceiling windows, concierge desk, the kind of place Marcus had never stepped foot in, the kind of place Shayla apparently had. He sat there at the kitchen table until the sun came up. Didn't wake Shayla, didn't confront her, just sat there with the laptop open and the numbers staring back at him. When she came into the kitchen that morning, he was drinking coffee. She asked if he'd slept. He said no. She asked if he was okay. He said he was thinking. She didn't push it. Just got Amara ready for the day while Marcus sat there planning his next move. He called Tasha during his lunch break, told her everything, the inheritance, the properties, the $525 million, the secret bank account, the apartment downtown. Tasha listened without interrupting. When he finished, she was quiet for a long moment. She's been setting up her exit, Marcus, with your money. For how long? Long enough to have a whole second life ready. That confirmation hurt more than discovering it himself. Marcus asked Tasha what he should do. She told him to talk to a lawyer, document everything, protect himself. Most importantly, don't let Shayla know about the inheritance yet. Not until he understood what she'd been doing and why. That afternoon, Marcus drove to the apartment complex, stood in the lobby, asked the doorman if Mrs. Williams was in. The doorman, a young guy who probably wasn't supposed to give out that information, nodded. Unit 904, she's usually here most afternoons. Marcus didn't go up, didn't knock on the door, didn't confront her there. He just needed to know it was real, that this wasn't some mistake, that his wife really had been living a second life with money she'd stolen from him. He went back to his car and sat there, thought about the birthday party, the water poured over the chicken. That's all you deserve. Cheap chicken for a cheap man. She'd said that before she knew about the inheritance, before there was any reason to be sweet to him. That was how she really saw him. That was the truth. Marcus spent the next week doing exactly what Tasha suggested. He contacted Thompson and asked for a recommendation for a family law attorney. Thompson gave him 3 names. Marcus chose the woman. She was sharp, direct, asked questions that hurt to answer but needed to be asked. She reviewed all the documents, the bank statements, the property records, the trust papers. She explained what would happen in a divorce, what was protected, what wasn't, what Shayla could claim and what she couldn't. The attorney explained that the trust was premarital. Technically, Marcus hadn't even known about it until after he'd decided to take action. Everything in it was separate from marital assets. Shayla had no claim to any of it. But the money she'd taken from their joint account, the money from his paychecks, that was marital money she'd misappropriated. Marcus could file for it back, could press charges if he wanted to. The attorney recommended getting copies of everything first. Document it all. Build the case. Then move. Marcus did exactly that. He printed every bank statement, every transaction record, every receipt he could find. He took photos of the documents Thompson had given him and stored them separately. He opened his own bank account at a different bank. He contacted the property management firm handling his trust's buildings and introduced himself. They were professional, respectful, told him they'd been waiting to hear from him, said they'd continue managing everything exactly as they had been until he instructed otherwise. When he was ready, when everything was documented and secured, Marcus came home early one afternoon. Shayla was surprised to see him. She was dressed up, hair done, makeup on, getting ready to go out. She asked what he was doing home. He told her they needed to talk, put a folder on the kitchen table, sat down, waited for her to sit across from him. "I know about the apartment." Shayla's face went through several expressions in rapid succession: confusion, realization, panic, then something harder, defensive. "You went through my things?" "I went through our joint bank account, saw where our money's been going." "That's my account too. I can do what I want with it." "Not when you're stealing from me." That word hung in the air. Stealing. Shayla stood up, started to walk away. Marcus didn't raise his voice. "Sit down. We're not done." She turned back. There was something in his tone she'd never heard before, something that made her pause. She sat. Marcus opened the folder, pulled out the bank statements, the highlighted transactions, the 3 years of redirected money. $127,000. That's how much you took from our household to fund your second life. Shayla's jaw tightened. She didn't deny it, didn't try to explain it away, just stared at the papers. Finally, she said, "You don't understand what it's like being stuck here." "Stuck where?" "In this house with a child. While you're always at work. I needed something for myself." "So you stole from us, from Amara's future, to pay for an apartment I didn't know about." "I was going to tell you eventually." "When?" Shayla didn't answer. Marcus pulled out more papers, the receipts, the luxury purchases, the girls' trips that cost thousands. "This isn't about being stuck. This is about you living a completely different life, while I worked myself to death thinking we were building something together." "We weren't building anything," Shayla said quietly. "You were working at a warehouse. I was raising a kid alone. That's not a life. That's surviving. That's what marriage is sometimes, surviving together until things get better." "Things weren't getting better, Marcus. They were staying exactly the same. You were staying exactly the same." There it was, the truth underneath everything. Marcus leaned back in his chair. "When did you stop respecting me?" Shayla looked at him, really looked at him, and for the first time in that conversation she was honest. "When I realized you'd never be more than a warehouse worker." The words hit exactly as she'd intended them to. Marcus felt them land, felt them settle. He nodded slowly. "I married potential. You gave me poverty. I was building an escape plan because I deserve better. Marcus stood up. I'm filing for divorce. You can keep the apartment until the lease ends. After that, you're on your own. Shayla's expression changed immediately. The defensiveness disappeared. Panic replaced it. Wait, Marcus, wait. We can work this out. We don't need to do this. Think about Amara. Think about what divorce will do to her. I am thinking about Amara. She deserves a father with self-respect. You'll never afford child support on a warehouse salary. You'll lose everything. Marcus looked at his wife, the woman who'd poured water on his contribution to their daughter's birthday party, the woman who'd stolen over $100,000 from him, the woman who'd just told him he'd never be more than what he was. And he said something he'd been holding back for days. We'll see. He walked out of the kitchen, out of the house, got in his car and drove. He didn't know where he was going, just drove until he ended up at Tasha's apartment. She opened the door and took one look at his face and pulled him inside. He told her what happened, what Shayla had said, how she'd seen him all along. Tasha listened. Then she said something that stayed with him. She showed you who she was before she knew about your money. That's the blessing in this, Marcus. Now you know what was real and what was not. Marcus filed for divorce 3 days later. Shayla hired an attorney immediately, a young guy fresh out of law school trying to make a name for himself. Aggressive, confident. He sent over a proposal demanding 50% of all marital assets, primary custody of Amara, and substantial child support based on Marcus's earning potential. The proposal came with a threat. If Marcus fought it, they'd drag the case out, make it expensive, make it painful. Marcus's attorney responded with their own filing, full financial disclosure, evidence of misappropriated funds, a petition for primary custody based on Shayla's pattern of deceit and financial irresponsibility. Shayla's attorney had clearly told her this would be easy, that Marcus would fold, that he couldn't afford to fight. So when the discovery phase began and Marcus's attorney filed the Williams family trust documents, the response was immediate. Shayla's attorney called for a recess, called his own client, called back requesting an emergency meeting. The tone shifted completely. The meeting happened in a conference room. Shayla was there with her attorney. Marcus was there with his. The trust documents were spread across the table. $525 million in commercial real estate, 18 to 22 million in annual rental income, 47 properties in Center City, Philadelphia, all in Marcus's name, all protected as premarital inheritance. Shayla stared at the documents like they were written in a foreign language. Her attorney was doing the same math Marcus's had done. None of it was marital. None of it could be touched. They'd come in expecting to leverage Marcus's poverty against him. Instead, they were looking at generational wealth they had no claim to. Shayla finally looked at Marcus. "You've had this the whole time?" Marcus's attorney answered for him. Mr. Williams received notification of his inheritance the week of his daughter's birthday party. He made no decisions regarding his marriage until he fully understood the situation. Shayla's face went through a series of changes. She was doing the math too, the timeline. The birthday party had been before he knew. The water poured on the chicken had been before he knew. Everything she'd said and done had been when she thought he was powerless, when she thought he'd always be exactly what she saw, and she'd shown him exactly who she was in return. Her attorney tried to recover, argued that Marcus's attorney started working for him after he knew about the inheritance, so there was clearly some financial means. Argued that the lifestyle during the marriage suggested hidden assets, argued anything he could think of. Marcus's attorney let him talk. Then she pulled out the next set of documents, the bank statements, the transfers, the secret apartment. Amara thrived. She saw her mother twice a week. Shayla would come to the supervised visitation center, play with her daughter for 2 hours, then leave. The visits were cordial but distant. Shayla had moved back in with her sister, worked retail at a department store, lived a smaller life than she'd planned. Marcus never gloated about it, never used it against her, just made sure Amara had what she needed and let the rest go. One evening, Tasha came by to check on him. They sat on the porch while Amara played in the yard. Tasha asked him if he'd ever told Shayla about the money before filing for divorce. Marcus shook his head. She needed to show me who she was without it. Tasha nodded, and she did. That was the truth of it. Shayla had shown him exactly who she was when she thought he had nothing, when she thought he'd always be a warehouse worker who'd never amount to more. She'd poured water on his contribution and told him it was all he deserved. She'd stolen his money and built an escape plan. She'd looked him in the eye and said she married potential but got poverty. None of that was because she knew about the inheritance. It was because she didn't. Marcus thought about his grandmother often, understood now why she'd made him wait. Character isn't built in comfort. It's built in struggle. Integrity isn't proven in abundance. It's proven when you have nothing and still do the right thing. His grandmother had wanted him to know his own worth before wealth changed how the world saw him. She'd wanted him to choose a partner who loved him, not what he could provide. She'd given him the gift of clarity, even though it had cost him a marriage. He'd learned that betrayal has a way of revealing truth, that sometimes the worst thing that can happen to you is also the thing that saves you. That water poured on chicken at a birthday party can be the moment everything becomes clear. Shayla had reached out once, a few months after everything was finalized, sent a text asking if they could talk, said she wanted to explain. Marcus declined. There was nothing she could explain that would change what had happened, nothing she could say that would undo what she'd done. The truth was already out. The consequences were already lived. Talking would just be an attempt to rewrite history, and history didn't need rewriting. It needed to be learned from. Marcus found peace in that decision, found peace in his routine, found peace in watching Amara grow up, knowing her father's love was unconditional. He didn't celebrate Shayla's downfall, didn't flaunt the wealth she'd never known about, just lived his life with quiet dignity. The same man he'd been before, just with clarity now. Some betrayals are blessings in disguise. They force you to see what was always there. Marcus lost a wife who never valued him, but he gained something more important. He gained himself back. He gained the knowledge that he'd done everything right, even when it looked like he had nothing. He gained the peace that comes from knowing your character was tested and held strong. He gained his daughter's future without compromise. And on quiet evenings, when Amara was asleep and the house was still, Marcus would sit on his porch and think about his grandmother, about how she'd known, about how she'd protected him in ways he couldn't understand until he'd lived through it, about how love sometimes looks like making someone wait for something they'll eventually inherit anyway, because the inheritance wasn't really about the money, it was about who he'd become while he thought he had nothing. The water poured on that chicken had been meant to humiliate him, to remind him of his place, to show him what he deserved in Shayla's eyes. Instead, it had become the moment everything changed, the moment the mask slipped, the moment truth revealed itself. And Marcus was grateful for it, not because it didn't hurt, but because pain that reveals truth is better than comfort that hides it. He still worked at the warehouse, still clocked in and out, still did his job with pride, because that's who he was, not because he had to, but because he chose to. And choice, he'd learned, was the real inheritance his grandmother had left him. The choice to be who he was regardless of circumstances. The choice to maintain dignity when others tried to take it. The choice to let truth do the work revenge never could. Those choices had cost him a marriage, but they'd earned him something worth more: peace. Marcus's story raises a question. When someone shows you who they are, do you listen? Have you ever stayed quiet and let the truth reveal itself? Drop your thoughts in the comments. And if this story meant something to you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. I'll see you in the next one.